1 Samuel chapter 14. And the day comes that Jonathan, son of Saul, says to the young man carrying his weapons, Come, and we pass over to the station of the Philistines, which is on the other side of this. And he has not declared it to his father. And Saul is abiding at the extremity of Gibeah, under the pomegranate, which is in Migron. And the people who are with him are about 600 men. And Ahiah, son of Ahitub, brother of Ichabod, son of Phinehas, son of Eli the priest of Yahweh, in Shiloh, was bearing an ephod. And the people did not know that Jonathan has gone. And between the passages where Jonathan sought to pass over to the station of the Philistines is the edge of a rock on one side, and the edge of a rock on the other side. And the name of one is Bozez, and the name of the other Seneh. One edge is fixed on the north in front of Michmash, and the other one on the south in front of Gibeah. And Jonathan says to the young man carrying his weapons, Come, and we pass over to the station of these uncircumcised. It may be Yahweh works for us, for there is no restraint to Yahweh to save by many or by few. And the bearer of his weapons says to him, Do all that is in your heart, turn for yourself, behold, I am with you, as your own heart. And Jonathan says, Behold, we are passing over to the men, and are revealed to them. If they say to us, Stand still until we have come to you, then we have stood in our place, and do not go up to them. And if they thus say, Come up against us, then we have gone up, for Yahweh has given them into our hand, and this is the sign to us. And both of them are revealed to the station of the Philistines. And the Philistines say, Behold, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hid themselves. And the men of the station answer Jonathan and the bearer of his weapons, and say, Come up to us, and we cause you to know something. And Jonathan says to the bearer of his weapons, Come up after me, for Yahweh has given them into the hand of Israel. And Jonathan goes up on his hands and on his feet, and the bearer of his weapons after him, and they fall before Jonathan. And the bearer of his weapons is putting them to death after him. And the first striking which Jonathan and the bearer of his weapons have struck is of about 20 men, in about half a furrow of a yoke of a field. And there is a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people, and the station and the destroyers have trembled, even they, and the earth shakes, and it becomes a trembling of God. And the watchmen of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin see, and behold, the multitude has melted away, and it goes on and is beaten down. And Saul says to the people who are with him, Now inspect and see, who has gone from us? And they inspect, and behold, Jonathan and the bearer of his weapons are not. And Saul says to Ahiah, Bring the Ark of God near, for the Ark of God has been with the sons of Israel on that day. And it comes to pass, while Saul spoke to the priest, that the noise which is in the camp of the Philistines goes on, going on and becoming great. And Saul says to the priest, Remove your hand. And Saul is called, and all the people who are with him, and they come to the battle, and behold, the sword of each has been against his neighbor, a very great destruction. And the Hebrews who have been with the Philistines before the day prior, who had gone up with them into the camp, have turned around, even they, to be with Israel, who are with Saul and Jonathan. And all the men of Israel who are hiding themselves in the whole country of Ephraim have heard that the Philistines have fled, and they pursue, even they, after them in battle. And Yahweh saves Israel on that day, and the battle has passed over to Beth-Aven. And the men of Israel have been distressed on that day, and Saul adjures the people, saying, Cursed is the man who eats food until the evening, and I have been avenged of my enemies. And none of the people have tasted food. And all those of the land have come into a forest, and there's honey on the face of the field. And the people come into the forest, and behold, the honey has dropped, and none is moving his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. And Jonathan has not heard of his father's adjuring the people, and puts forth the end of his rod which is in his hand, and dips it in the honeycomb, and brings back his hand to his mouth, and his eyes see. And a man of the people answers and says, Your father certainly adjured the people, saying, Cursed is the man who eats food today. and the people are weary. And Jonathan says, My father has troubled the land. Now see that my eyes have become bright, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much more if the people had well eaten today of the spoil of its enemies which it has found? For now the striking has not been great among the Philistines. And they strike on that day among the Philistines from Michmash to Aijalon, and the people are very weary. And the people make toward the spoil, and take sheep and oxen, and sons of the herd, and slaughter on the earth, and the people eat with the blood. And they declare to Saul, saying, Behold, the people are sinning against Yahweh to eat with the blood. And he says, You have dealt treacherously. Roll a great stone to me today. And Saul says, Be scattered among the people, and you have said to them, Each bring his ox to me, and each his sheep, and you have slain them in this place and eaten, and you do not sin against Yahweh to eat with the blood. And all the people bring them, each one with his ox in his hand, that night, and slaughter them there. And Saul built an altar to Yahweh. With it he has begun to build altars to Yahweh. And Saul says, Let us go down after the Philistines by night, and we pray on them until the morning light, and do not leave a man of them. And they say, Do all that is good in your eyes. And the priest says, Let us draw near to God here. And Saul asks of God, Do I go down after the Philistines? Do you give them into the hand of Israel? And he has not answered him on that day. And Saul says, Everyone draw near here, the chiefs of the people, and know and see in what this sin has been today. For Yahweh lives, who is saving Israel. Surely, if it is in my son Jonathan, surely he dies. And none is answering him out of all the people. And he says to all Israel, You are on one side, and I and my son Jonathan are on another side. And the people say to Saul, Do that which is good in your eyes. And Saul says to Yahweh, God of Israel, Give perfection. And Jonathan and Saul are captured, and the people went out. And Saul says, Cast between me and my son Jonathan. And Jonathan is captured. And Saul says to Jonathan, Declare to me, what have you done? And Jonathan declares to him and says, I certainly tasted a little honey with the end of the rod that is in my hand. Behold, I die. And Saul says, Thus God does, and thus does he add, for you certainly die, Jonathan. And the people say to Saul, Does Jonathan die who worked this great salvation in Israel? Certainly not. Yahweh lives, if there falls to earth even one hair from his head. For with God he has worked this day. And the people rescue Jonathan, and he has not died. And Saul captured the kingdom over Israel, and he fights all around against his enemies, against Moab, and against the sons of Ammon, and against Edom, and against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. And wherever he turns he distresses them. And he makes a force and strikes Amalek, and delivers Israel out of the hand of its spoiler. And the sons of Saul are Jonathan, and Eshui, and Melchishua. As for the name of his 2 daughters, the name of the firstborn is Merab, and the name of the younger, Michal. And the name of the wife of Saul is Ahinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the head of his host is Abner, son of Ner, uncle of Saul. And Kish is the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, is son of Ahiel. And the war is severe against the Philistines all the days of Saul. When Saul has seen any mighty man, and any son of valor, then he gathers him to himself.